Really, Ellie? You had to do it again, didn't you? You had to kill another bunny. Hi everyone, Mike here with you guys once again, and it is time for my review of The Last of Us Part 2, and my opinion on the whole controversy surrounding the game. I'm going to be covering both in this video, because I only want to do one video on this game. Because I have a lot to say about it. You should know this is... I cannot talk about this game without spoiling it, so... Because of the way the plot is set up in this game, it's designed to... in a way that I can't discuss it without spoiling anything. So, I'm going to give my initial... my thumbs up or down right now before we go any further, so that you guys know whether or not you should pick the game up or not. Okay, now I'm going to get into detail. Now that my thumb is up, go pick up the game and then come back and watch the rest of this video. This game is came out at a time when we are even more divided, and we've been divided for a long time, but now even more so. It's gotten to the point where it's reached pop culture, not just political things. Fuck. Okay. It's a shame that things happened the way they did, that the game got leaked, that there was crunch culture, that there was a lot of crunch involved, and also the way that Naughty Dog has handled things regarding trying to plug in the leaks, as well as how some of the fans have behaved also. All this toxicity is really unfortunate, because this is one of the best and most intense experiences I've had from a narrative perspective. It's not quite the masterpiece of the original. I think the original is just a little bit better, but this comes quite close. And since the original is such a high standard, the fact that this is not far behind is still an astonishing achievement on so many levels. When it comes to the craftsmanship, the level design, sound design, performances from the cast, particularly Ashley Johnson as Ellie and Laura Bailey as Abby. And the things that and the narrative itself, although it's not quite as focused, it's a bit more larger in scope. It's more like a novel than a film in a way. It asks the player. It asks a lot of you emotionally. Like, it asks you to empathize and to see. At first, it gets you emotionally stirred up against somebody, but then it forces you to walk in their shoes, and that is apparently a tall order for a lot of people. I think from what I've seen, the game seems to resonate better with people who thought that Joel's decision was wrong at the end of the first game than those who felt that Joel was completely justified and he did nothing wrong whatsoever. For me personally, I felt that Joel's decision was understandable up until the point where he lied to Ellie. Once he told that lie, it was apparent at that point to me that Joel did it for himself, that he was trying to not relive the pain that he endured before. He put that above what Ellie's wants and needs were. And this game confirms it. Finally. Because as far as I'm concerned, Ellie is the one that really gets to have, her opinion is the one that matters the most, because it directly affects her brain. Okay, so let me see. I think that's... So, did I discuss... I think I discussed the controversy, pretty much what I wanted to discuss about it. I guess I'm going to point some fingers here at the controversy before I go into the game itself, where mistakes were made, and it was made by a lot of people. Number one, Naughty Dog for crunch culture, Naughty Dog for misleading the public. A lot of people still complain about Metal Gear Solid 2. They do, to this day. I hear complaints about it to this day. So the fact that they would emulate that is... I understand why, because the story is set up in a way that everything is a spoiler, but You could have done that without lying. You may not have had as many initial sales as Sony would have liked, but you would have had more credibility. People wouldn't have felt as gypped because, and you didn't have to spoil anything. All you really had to do is simply announce that the sequel exists. So having the sequel exist is enough to break sales records on this game. It really is. All you really need to do to advertise it is say, this is the sequel to The Last of Us. Done. That is the selling point. You didn't need to be misleading with your marketing. In fact, because of misleading marketing, that could probably get you in legal trouble. So there's a reason why the fans will jump on that, and I understand that. And also, when it came to how they handled the leaks, once the leaks did happen, Sony had every right to plug the leaks themselves. Naughty Dog had every right to plug the leaks themselves. I, unfortunately, had the leaks spoiled for me by a conservative YouTube commentator who didn't give me a spoiler warning before he indulged into spoilers. Thanks, no bullshit. Thank you very much. Anyway, but by the way, most of the people that were commenting on the spoilers didn't at least gave you a warning, but he did not. So shame on him for that. Although Sony, I completely support Sony's right to take down the leaks themselves. Where I felt they went too far was when they were striking down channels for simply sharing their opinion on the leaks. There were channels that talked about their thoughts about it, but they didn't share what the leaks were. They simply complained about the leaks without revealing them. And they, unfortunately, got flagged. They got copyright struck, some of them twice, and I felt that was unfair. So what happened to Geeks and Gamers, what happened to Ryan Kinnell, I felt was unfair. And if Sony had not done that, it would have just been the anti-SJWs complaining, and it would have been relegated to just their corner. The game would have still been controversial, but I think that would have helped mitigate the review bombing had Sony only focused on plugging the leaks and not copyright strike people's opinion of them. There's a big difference between sharing the leaks and giving an opinion on what you thought of them. Big difference. Anyways, so now I gotta go into who else, because it's not just them. The anti-SJW crowd. My main critique of their critique of this game and the leaks was that they were complaining about Anita being involved, even though I watched Anita and Carolyn Petit's commentary on the game, and it's confirmed that they were not involved because they had a lot of complaints about it. Even though they had a lot of praise for it too. Which, by the way, if you watch that Famous Frequency video, it's really nuanced. And it's a shame she doesn't allow comments, because the interesting comments that could happen would be very insightful, because it's a very insightful review. But the people that were complaining were showing clips of Neil talking about the first game, yet these people on the anti-SJW side were praising the first game, and yet complaining about the sequel for doing things that the first game did. Now, if you want more information on that, I know I'm being vague here, watch my previous video on The Last of Us Was Always Feminist, and you'll understand why I felt their critiques on that level was inconsistent. Also, I felt, like I said, a lot of people had a hard time with what the game was asking them to do. The game was asking you to walk in the shoes of somebody you hate, that you were made to hate, because they killed off one of your favorite characters. And the bias towards that character, I think, made it very difficult for a lot of people to understand what the game was about. Especially those who felt Joel was completely justified at the end of the first game. I also think that some people wanted this to be a revenge fantasy. It's not that. What this is a cautionary tale, a study on the detrimental effects of vengeance, on the cycle of violence, on perception and bias. In fact, I think a lot of the critiques of this game have, some of it, to me, just feels like it's confirming the issues that Neil Druckmann and his company were trying to bring up with the game, and hence a bias. That people's own biases prevented them from truly getting what this game was about, and thus proving the game's point in a way. Which, honestly, to me, it's a strength of the game's narrative and what it was trying to do. So, let's see what else. Also, I have to give a huge wag of my finger. Honestly, that doesn't do it justice, because these are the worst people of all of them. Because the other people, most of them weren't bad people, they were just people who made mistakes. But these people are awful right here. And that is, of course, the people who left bigoted comments on Laura Bailey's and Neil Druckmann's page. You can hate the game if you want. That's perfectly fine. But you can do that without being a bigot, okay? You don't have to make comments that are bigoted to prove that point. Which leads me to my final complaint and final finger pointing, and that is some people in the mainstream media were lumping in on purpose people like Angry Joe, who were harsh of the game, lumping them in and blaming them for the bigoted comments that the people who were involved in the game were having to deal with. It reminds me, honestly, of when Jerry Falwell blamed 9/11 on liberals and said, if you were pro-abortion or pro-gay, you helped this happen. That is exactly what somebody at GameSpot, when he blamed Angry Joe for the bigoted comments that people were making, you're not that far from Jerry Fartwell, okay? The person at GameSpot, I don't know his name, you're not that far from Jerry Fartwell. Just because it comes from the left, doesn't make what the right wing does, the mistake that they make, correct. So when the right wing does something wrong, it doesn't make it better when the left does it. And that's exactly what some people in the mainstream media were doing by lumping in people who were harsh of the game, critical of the game, with the bigots. There are two different things. There was nothing wrong with what Angry Joe said, and he should not be blamed for what the bigots were saying. Fuck the bigots, absolutely. But Angry Joe has a right to his opinion. Even though I don't necessarily agree with it, that's fine. Okay, so I think that's enough finger pointing on the controversy. Let's get out of that, because to me, what I loved about this game was when I got off Twitter and I got off social media and I just played the game. Honestly, it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I was able to enjoy nerdy things again without all the drama and the negativity. It's great. That's my biggest recommendation for you guys. Turn off social media and play your games. Best thing you can do. And this game is a perfect example of that. So let's go into the themes here. Let's get into the game itself, because that's really what this is about. This is a review of the game itself. Major character is killed off. You have to go out and find and get revenge. And that's how it starts. But it doesn't continue. It doesn't stick with that. It's more complicated than that. Because as you go, you as Ellie, you begin to lose your humanity. And you become like them. And as you progress, you start to become like the monster that you're hunting. And like there was a moment where I was chasing somebody down as Ellie. And I was chasing them down for no other reason than to murder that person. That's what I was doing. It made me so uncomfortable, even though I have done this mechanic a billion times before. This is the first time that when I was chasing somebody down, I was like, what am I doing? And it was, I think, the first moment that you really understand the weight of the situation. And it doesn't let up from there. By the end of the game, at the beginning of the game, I wanted vengeance. I hated Abby. But by the end of the game, I was begging Ellie to stop, because she was losing everything for this addiction. And make no mistake, this cycle of hatred is portrayed as an addiction. She had to hit rock bottom. She could have everything in the world going for her, but it wasn't enough. Now, part of it was because of PTSD, and I felt like her partner Dina could have been more understanding of that PTSD. But make no mistake, Ellie throws everything away for more vengeance. At the point where I was like, okay, stop. I was already at that point. But then she sticks a knife to a kid's throat. Ellie. Ellie had become a monster at that point. And that was the point. And by the end of the final boss fight, I was saying, please stop. Ellie, please. I was begging her to stop. Now that's just Ellie's portion. Abby's portion, and this is the hardest part for a lot of people because she starts off as a completely cold-hearted bitch. Totally cruel, totally evil. She is set up to be the villain in the beginning. However, once you play as her, you understand, you start to become attached, at least you're supposed to. This didn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. At first I was like, it wasn't working for me, but once she was introduced to the kids, she had gotten to me, and I felt that if it wasn't for the connection with the controller, it may not have worked. Because you spend time with people, and you physically connect with them by holding your controller. To me, that adds so much. Without that, I don't think the narrative could work. But with the controller in your hand, with you interacting and bonding, getting to know and having casual conversation, holding that controller makes a world of difference. It connects you to what's going on. You are a part of this experience. That is the power of video games, and the power of video games as a narrative. So, and by the end of it, Abby had regained her humanity when Ellie was losing hers, and I thought that was powerful. The performances, with particular shout out to Laura Bailey and Ashley Johnson. You deserve Game of the Year nominations for your performances. Absolutely. You both deserve it. And I would also give a nomination for Best Level Design and Sound Design, and as well as Games for Impact and Game of the Year. This game deserves all those credentials, in my opinion. Like I said, it's not quite as focused as the first game, and that's why I think the first game's a little bit better. But this game still is a powerful achievement on its own. Now, I wanted to discuss other things too that will make this game important, and that is the representation. I get really worried when media talks about representation because it often comes across as tokenistic. They make the representation the focus instead of the story and the character. And as a result, characters either aren't written well enough, the story suffers, and all those other things. Or even if they're written really well, the mainstream media kind of overshadows it by obsessing over somebody's orientation or whatever. So I'm always weary. You have to make sure we do representation correctly. And that's a subject in and of itself that I will do in a future video at some point. But the representation that is here, luckily, does not suffer from tokenism. It does not suffer. Ellie's sexuality is not the only thing that defines her. It's an important part of who she is as a character. But Ellie is so much more nuanced than that, and the way that the relationship between her and Dina unfold is very effective and very human, and ultimately very tragic, considering where things go. The moment that I got attached to them as a couple, when it really clicked with me and I realized it, was actually an optional scene that you can completely miss. Do not leave downtown Seattle until you've gone to the record store. That's what I'll say on that. Also, this game has music making software built in. There are amazing videos. You know how Ellie plays the guitar? It's so well done that I've seen people literally perform songs that currently exist, like Metallica and Johnny Cash's cover of Nine Inch Nails. You can do that because the game built it in. The way that mechanic, the guitar mechanic, is literally a VST inside of a video game. Another impressive and very impressive feat for Naughty Dog on that front. They are masters of their craft for sure. Are there complaints? Yes. But they're very nitpicky for the most part in terms of what's in this game. For example, the pacing. The ending drags on for a bit. There are certain enemies towards the end that I felt didn't need to be there. But I think what alleviates that is is by pacing yourself and not playing too much at once. That definitely helps alleviate that. Like I said, it's built more like a novel. And oftentimes if you're reading a long novel, you put it down, you come back later. And I think that LA Noire really benefited from that for me, and I feel like this game did the same. So pace yourself well with this, because there's a lot to digest. Very intense, emotional, and you're going to want to pace yourself. Trust me, it will make the experience better for you. Another thing that it brings up is I don't want to say that because I feel like you need to experience that on your own. So, but there's a character that brings up an important subject that doesn't get enough attention even in progressive media. Fine, I'll talk about it. There's a trans character in this game. And it may come across as preachy on paper or watching it on YouTube, but when you're, again, this is the power of interactive media. When you play, it becomes much more real and much more authentic, the character's story and what their struggles are. And since trans issues and trans etiquette is not something that is talked about enough, it's a huge opportunity to sort of teach people certain things, like why dead naming is wrong, and things like that. Very important. But it does it in a way that, as you're playing, it's not as heavy-handed as it sounds when you talk about it or watch it on YouTube. Playing it personalizes it. Just like the feminist themes and the themes of rape culture were personalized in the first game when you played as Ellie. In that game. So that's another huge achievement right there for Naughty Dog. Man. I guess if I have a major complaint overall, it's not necessarily for this game itself in terms of what's in it. It's more of the existence of a sequel in the first place. Because one of the things that makes the reason why the ending for the first game is so powerful is because it's nuanced, because it's ambiguous. And for 7 years, that was the case. Unfortunately, with the existence of a sequel, that's gone now. People aren't going to be forced to think about the ending anymore. Future gamers are just going to go right into the second game and have the answers given for them. And I feel like that. So even though I think the sequel is well made, it's excellently crafted, I still think the first game works best the game works best as a standalone one-time experience, because as good as the sequel is, it does weaken the impact of the ending of the first game, and that was my biggest fear, and that is confirmed. So, yeah. Also, the difficulty options are phenomenal and groundbreaking. Like, for example, because you can tailor the difficulty to different aspects individually. So, for example, you want a stealth experience, but you don't want to deal with puzzles. You can choose to skip puzzles and increase the difficulty on stealth. Or if you want more combat-based experience, but you don't want to go scrounging for items, you can make items easy to find, but make the combat experience tougher if you want. Or if you're like me, and you love easy games, you can have a super easy experience, and you can just focus on the story. Now, this, as great as the system is, it does lead to some problems now that didn't exist before, that I have to point out. Some minor gripes. I would have liked to be able to skip encounters if I struggle with them too much. So, just like with Rockstar, if you die too much, you should be able to skip ahead if you choose. Also, there's some other examples I need to mention really quick. I'm trying to think. Some other things I would like tailored. Oh yeah, I do not like the blocking mechanic, and I don't like that it's forced on you. A lot of people love the blocking mechanic, and it's not bad. It's well done, but it wasn't fun for me personally. So I would have liked the option to disable that in the difficulty, accessibility things. Because oftentimes, when I would hit block, I wouldn't know if the enemy was going to do another attack or sometimes 3 attacks in a row before I could get a hit on it. And that made things a little frustrating. But yeah, minor gripe, something they can implement next time with their next game. Because I think those difficulty settings are going to be a game changer. And this game is a game changer overall. I hope that in the future, when people play this game and the controversy is not in their minds, they're going to be able to see the game for what it is, and I think people are going to have an easier time hopefully digesting this game. It's a high recommendation. Best thing you can do is just turn off the internet, ignore all reviews, because we're getting to a point where I think critic reviews can't be trusted, but neither can user reviews. Just play the game for yourself. If you love the first game, play this game. I don't know if you'll love it. It might not work for you, but still it's worth doing because it's such a bold experience. Anyways, that's all I got to say. Thank you guys for watching. I got my game done just in time for Ghost to come out. I finished Last of Us 2 just in time for Ghost to come out, which is awesome. But I still got to play Iron Man VR, so I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.